Your feet are one of the most mobile areas of your body, but so many people are trying to restrict their motion, which is actually compromising the health of your feet. On this week's episode of the Exercises Health Podcast, we're explaining why your feet need to be mobile and what you can do about it. We're going to cue our introduction and we're going to dive right into this conversation. Hey, welcome back, exercisers, to the Exercise is Health podcast, brought to you by Exercise for Life Studios, where we believe that your health is your most valuable asset. And the single best thing that you can do to both boost and protect this asset is exercise. Specifically, exercise is geared towards building the health and function of your muscles. We are your hosts, Charlie
and Julie.
And today we are talking about the feet, okay? The feet need to be one of the most mobile areas of your body and should be one of the most mobile areas of your body. But for so many people, that's not the case. And the truth of the matter is that can severely compromise the health of your feet and honestly the health of the rest of your orthopedic system, your knees, your hips, your back, all the way up to your neck. But today we are focusing on the feet and we're talking about why it is so important that your feet are mobile.
That's right. I think a lot of people don't realize how important the feet are when it comes to your entire body. We're going to dive really deep into this, but let's talk about a little bit of foot facts to start off with. Well, first of all, a lot of people don't realize there's 28 different bones in your feet, 33 joints, and 50 muscles. So if you think about like a hip that gets a lot of or a lot of, we all know what the hip is and whatever, that's like one joint. In your feet, there are 33 joints. And the thing we need to know, and I need you guys to know about the feet, is that where there are joints in your body is designed to have movement. It's also designed to have stability and strength, because we know that when there's a joint, there's going to be muscles that cross that joint. So when we're thinking about the feet, knowing how many bones and joints and muscles just live in that area, the area has the opportunity to be a highly mobile, but we also need to realize it needs to be a highly strengthened and strong area to support all the structures of the feet, but also the rest of the structures of your body.
Yeah, this is one of the more interesting things about the feet, because a lot of times we have this idea that the foot is the foot, meaning like a singular thing, right? But exactly like you're saying, Julie, there's 28 bones in each of your feet, okay? And that's if you want to include the ankle, the tibia and fibula, that makes 30 bones for each foot, okay? So it's not just like one thing, like you think of like your arm bone. It's multiple, okay? 33 joints in each foot, okay? 50 muscles that help to control and influence each foot. There's 100 muscles just for your feet alone. That's crazy. And exactly like you're saying, Julie, when there's an area of your body that has joints, that means that's an area of your body that should be able to move. And when there's an area of your body that has muscles, all right, that's an area of your body that should be strong and that needs to be strengthened, okay? And so a lot of times what ends up happening is we neglect the feet. We forget that, oh my gosh, nearly 20% of our body's skeletal muscles live within our feet, and we don't do exercises for them. We don't think about strengthening them. And as a result, the health, the function, and ultimately the mobility and the strength of the feet go on a downhill spiral. And a lot of people find themselves with foot issues or issues throughout the rest of their body because of feet that aren't strong, feet that aren't mobile, and feet that aren't working as they are designed to work.
That's right. A lot of times when you have foot issues, which is probably the number one reason people will start thinking about their feet, other than like a pedicure when they're going to the beach. But if you're having a foot issue, a lot of times the solution is immobilize. So do something to make your foot move less, or do something to directly change pain, like a pain reduction thing. So a lot of people like rub their feet or put it in like hot water, smush on them with their thumbs, or massage them at home. But it's never to improve the strength and function. And what we find is that because there is so many muscles, so many joints, and so many bones in your feet, if we can teach more and more people, and the people that we have here coming into our office, working on foot strength and working on these many muscles that live in your feet, then a lot of times the symptoms and those discomforts and those problems that you're experiencing in your feet change, because you're treating the joints in the foot the way that actually all joints should be treated. And the foot, like Charlie was saying, we don't think about as the foot. It's not just like a random singular flipper down there that we're like, we have this one item that's attached to us by our ankle and I don't know what's in there. But because of all the joints in there, when we start strengthening the different muscles and thus strengthening the motions at each of the joints, which also helps increase mobility to each of the joints, we see the whole system change. But I want to jump into this idea that there are all these individual joints, and they are joints that need to stay healthy, just like something like your hip joint. They're all called synovial joints.
Yeah, this is a key concept. And the reason why this is so important is because synovial joints have certain requirements in order to maintain their health, okay? The first requirement that they have is they have to be able to move. Okay, so like that's requirement number one. Synovial joints need motion in order to remain healthy. Okay, the motion allows the cartilage of the synovial joints to remain healthy. And if you have ever experienced any kind of arthritic changes within your joints, that is when the cartilage within the joints starts to degrade. Okay, it can go from kind of a chondromalacia to a crepitus to a full-blown arthritis. Okay, maybe the order is screwed up, but the end result is the arthritis there. Okay, that is when the cartilage within the joint has worn away or is no longer supporting the joint, is no longer present within the joint. Okay, so maintaining healthy joint cartilage is imperative for maintaining the health of the joint. And so if you're wondering what the cartilage needs in order to remain healthy, there's two things. The first of which is the joint that it's in needs to move, okay? It needs motion, all right, in order for it to remain healthy. And too often, one of the ways that people try to resolve foot-related symptoms is to immobilize the foot or is to not allow the foot to move. And while that can be very beneficial from a symptomatic standpoint, from a joint health, cartilage, synovial joint standpoint, you need your joints moving. And so that is actually not beneficial for the joints, for the cartilage of those synovial joints.
So the second thing that synovial joints and this kind of cartilage needs to stay healthy after movement is going to be force. Or you can think of that as pressure. The really cool thing about feet is like we walk on our feet a lot. So you really don't need to think like, oh my gosh, I need to go like lift really heavy dumbbells to keep, the synovial joints of my feet. But they do need to be mobile while you're using them, right? So it's a combination. You obviously can do strength training things for your feet. We do them with clients all the time. But the nice thing with feet is that because all of us have, adults usually are 100 plus pounds of weight going down or force going down on our foot joints, that's a great way to keep them healthy. We know we need that to get nutrients in and out of this very important and thing we want to keep, which is the cartilage in our in our feet joints and all of our joints, so that we aren't developing that arthritic condition. The other thing that really is amazing at creating force is our muscles. And so when our muscles are squeezing, that creates force, creates pressure, and this is a great way to keep joints healthy. Now, a lot of times when you hear force or pressure, you're thinking, I thought that was like bad. Like I don't want that on my feet. But actually when it's regulated, and the thing that regulates force is muscles. So when muscles are working well, when forces are regulated well, our feet feel great. They don't feel funky and not supported and achy. So we really need to shift how we address our feet in short-term solutions from immobilizing. Immobilizing can be fine in the very short term if tissues are recovering and things like that. But in the long term, we want to start thinking about our feet differently so that we can start promoting the health in our feet and the joints in our feet.
Absolutely. The strength of the muscles really is a key component for this, because not only will it help put the force through that cartilage, but it will also help the joints to move. Okay, so we see kind of a 2-for-1 here. By getting the muscles stronger, not only do we see more force going through the cartilage, which will help with the health of the cartilage, but we also see the joints become more mobile, because that cartilage is kind of like a sponge where it's not served by the circulatory system, meaning in order for it to get nutrients or to have its waste products removed, there's not a blood supply going to it. All right, so it is kind of sitting in this nutrient-rich fluid in in the joint itself, and it can soak up that nutrient-rich fluid. Okay, but only the parts of the cartilage that don't have like pressure or as much pressure going through it will be able to soak up, the fluid around it, because the parts that have more pressure, those are the ones that are getting squished, and the waste products and everything are then leaving the cartilage in that area. And so the reason why the motion is so important is because it changes which parts of your cartilage have more pressure or are getting squished, and which parts have less pressure and are not getting as squished. It would be like if you only used like one half of a sponge, at your kitchen sink. That one half would just kind of get worn and worn and worn and worn. The other half, it would never get, it wouldn't have any water going through it, but it would also, again, it would just be like stale and old and like become grumbly and everything like that, right? So you need that balance of both. You need that balance of, you can't just have, the one end that, is only getting squished all the time, and the other end that never gets any of the water. With your cartilage, you also need both. You need the parts that are getting squished and to become the parts that are getting unsquished, and the parts that aren't getting as squished to become more squished. And that happens with the joint motion, and then that also happens with the forces going through the joints, which your muscles are really good at supplying. And so the stronger your muscles become, the more force they're able to put through the joints. Again, that's kind of more squish that can go through, but then they're able to move your joints better, which means more areas or more aspects of your cartilage are able to get then squished and unsquished to soak up the fluid around and then release any kind of like waste products or whatnot that kind of build up within or that are associated with the cartilage.
That's right. So the biggest risk of immobilizing your foot, bracing your foot for a long-term solution for a foot issue, is that it's going to have detrimental effects on the actual 33 joints of your foot. And we want to see that you are building in habits of strengthening your feet, which can be done very easily, so that these joints stay really, really healthy. Now, the thing is that you might be listening to this like, but I have like symptomatic feet. That's the problem. Like I need my supports and my braces and the things that I use in my shoes so I don't have symptomatic feet. And the thing is that when you're strengthening your feet, you're working more and more towards your muscles, creating internal supports, or we could say internal braces or internal orthotics, so that the muscles are appropriately being supported and mobilized. So that's the cool thing about muscles, is because muscles are controlled by your brain and your nervous system, they're contracting when they need to contract, meaning giving you really tight support when they need to give you tight support, and they are releasing and relaxing when they need to relax, meaning giving you less support when you need less support. That's the hiccup that we see with external braces in the immobilization process of moving your foot less and less, is that we're not getting the appropriate support at the appropriate time. We're getting the same support at all the same time, and this really leads to muscle weakness over time, because if muscles don't have to work, there's no reason for them to contract and stay strong and keep those joints of your foot mobile.
Yeah, this is one of the biggest issues that we see across the board with clients, is that they've never really done all that much to strengthen their foot muscles. Their feet have always been something that they've just used to then either challenge the rest of their body or just kind of get through life. And their feet need some love too. Like, hey, we have so many muscles within us, so many joints, so many bones. This area needs some love and attention, specific love and attention as well. And so what we find is the better and stronger, the better functioning and the stronger we're able to get people's foot muscles, the better the rest of their body functions. In fact, I can say definitively that if there's one area of the body that impacts the rest of the body the greatest, that I've seen over the last 13 years of working hands-on with clients and with just with their bodies in general, it is the feet.
Totally.
100%. Get people's feet stronger, get people's feet working better. It helps so much up throughout the rest of their body, their knees, their hips, their low back, their shoulders, their neck. I've seen so much change throughout people's systems when their feet get stronger and when their feet get functioning better. The flip side is also true though, that when the feet are dysfunctional, when the feet are weak, when the feet aren't functioning as they should or are not moving as well as they should, the rest of their body can start to become more symptomatic. The rest of the body can start to take on more stress. And so, your feet, as humans, if we're walking, they're the first thing that's on the ground, that is impacting the ground. It's kind of a stupid saying because they're the only thing that's impacting the ground. But point
It is
being,
true.
but the rest of our body is kind of responding to the placement of our feet and the mobility of our feet, and the function of our feet. And so, if our feet are immobile, if our feet are dysfunctional, then the rest of the body has to compensate and react and respond to that. Okay, and so we see that the knee has to start to move in ways that it maybe shouldn't, or to the degree that it shouldn't. We start to see compensation pick up with the hips, compensations pick up with the low back, and it can really start to stress out those areas, like I said, all the way up to the neck and in the base of the skull.
That's right. I remember, so in my first year of college, I had a foot trauma, and I was in a boot for I can't even remember, but it was a long time, like 3 months or something. Anyways, so I'm walking around in this boot that's not letting my foot, none of the 33 joints of my foot work. My ankle, things were healing and whatever. But I remember I was walking around the UF campus, which is giant, by the way, and I did not stop. I just kept moving. But the amount of stress, I remember my knee, hip, and low back taking on because that lower joint was immobilized. And so you can get immobilization from a couple different things. You can get it from an external brace, like you have an injury, and so for the short term, you're wearing something. You can also get it from little things, like maybe you just tape up your ankle as preventative something, or maybe you put something in your shoe that prevents certain motions, like your arch from going down. But it can also happen from just weakness in your muscles. Your feet can become immobile. Maybe you're looking down at your feet right now because we're just talking about it, and you're like, my feet don't really move like other people's feet. Your feet might not move because of years and decades of never strengthening them. So weak muscles can also create limited motion or limited mobility. But this concept holds true, especially in the feet, but all over the body. I mean, think about if you had a wrist brace on, you're naturally going to think, yeah, I'm still going to do stuff with my hands. It's just my elbow, my shoulder, and my upper thoracic area is going to work harder. That's what happens in the feet, whether it's from an external brace or an internal problem, meaning you have too weak of muscles, or a combination of both. But it's always going to refer up the chain, making your knees work harder, making your hip, making your low back. In Charlie, I've seen it change his shoulder motion. Mm-hmm. So it can literally go up the entire chain. And you might think, oh, but finally my feet are asymptomatic. But we generally will see, okay, give it a few months and we'll start seeing low back pain. And we'll start seeing, and it's hard to understand where that's coming from. So then we blame it on old age. But it's all stemming from muscle weakness, because we're losing motion, because we're not strong, we're not able to handle the mobility that our body could be giving us.
So how do we get the muscles of your feet stronger? How do we get your feet functioning better? So you can definitely do exercises for your feet, right? You can, practice curling your toes and doing calf raises and straightening your toes and everything like that. And that's fine and well. That can be a really effective thing on your own. But what we have found, hands down, to be the most effective thing for strengthening the muscles of the feet, for helping the feet move better, for clearing up any compensation and dysfunctions within the feet, is muscle activation techniques. Like we said, there's 50 muscles in each foot, and with MAT, we're able to assess and address every single one of those muscles. So if some of the muscles are strong and some of the muscles are weak and dysfunctional, we're able to zero in on those weak and dysfunctional muscles and really get those muscles working better, get those muscles stronger, and figure out which areas specifically within your foot is not moving well, your foot is weak, and your foot is not functioning as it should, and then improve that overall. And like I said, for over 13 years now, I've seen time and again, by getting people's foot muscles functioning better, stronger, by getting people's feet more mobile with the MAT process, it has profound impacts throughout the rest of their system, their knees, their hips, their low back, all the way up to the base of their skull.
Charlie, have you ever had a client come in and whether they had foot symptoms or not, you found yourself working in their feet and they were just perfectly strong and everything was working well?
No.
Right away. I know, it's crazy. So sometimes you don't even have foot symptoms, but the lack of strength and mobility is still there. And I think highly because of, again, as we talked about, like in our culture and society, we don't really think about our feet. We don't ever strengthen our feet. We just wake up and think, oh, they should work. They should be ready to go. Slip them in my sneakers. And footwear can have a huge input into that. How we're using or not using our feet have a big input on that. And so it is just also just a really common area that I have yet also to see a client come in and be like, wow, your feet are just rocking, like they're just solid and strong. Usually they can use a good MAT session.
Absolutely.
Down there.
No, and the only people that have come in are ones that have been worked on with MAT. But if it's a fresh client, no, it's like whether it's foot symptoms or not, it's like, okay, yeah, these foot muscles need to get worked on. These foot muscles can certainly be improved. Is there weakness? There's that dysfunction there. And again, a lot of times it is not perceived by the person. They're not having foot symptoms. They're not like, oh, my calves are tight, or I'm getting these, cramping in my arches, or heel pain or anything like that. It's just like, well, if you've never had your foot muscles strengthened, guess what? They're in need of some strengthening. They're in need of some TLC. So if you are interested in getting your foot muscles assessed and getting them functioning better, getting them stronger with the MAT process, all you have to do to get on our schedule is go to www.matschaumburg.com. On our website, we have a big green button that says Get Started. You click that, you can see our availability, and you can schedule yourself for your initial MAT consultation and assessment. We'll figure out exactly where within your feet, as well as the rest of your system, you are likely having muscles that aren't contracting well before going into your first full session, and say, okay, yeah, let's get these working better. So again, all you have to do to get scheduled is go to www.matschaumburg.com. So who do you know that needs to hear this episode? Who do you know that has never had their foot muscles strengthened before with the MAT process, but is starting to experience either like tightness in their calves or some shin splints, or other symptoms that may be associated with the feet, heel pain, different things going on with their arches? Those can all be telltale signs that there's something going on with their feet. And just making sure that the feet aren't moving well may not be enough to actually help their system function better overall. You got to get those foot muscles stronger. You have to help the joints move appropriately, move better again for the overall health of the joint, and MAT can help you do exactly that. Share this episode with them so they can understand why it is so important to have their feet stronger, to have their feet more mobile, to have their feet functioning better. And while you're online, head on over to Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to us and leave us a rating and review. It helps people find our podcast when they're looking for information on exercise and when they're looking for information on health. So if you found value in this conversation today, let us know by leaving us a 5-star rating and review. Well, thanks so much for tuning in. We always appreciate it. Have a fantastic week, and we'll talk with you all next week.
This podcast is for information purposes only. The statements and views on this podcast are not medical advice. This podcast, including Julie and Charlie Gates, disclaim responsibility for any possible adverse effects from the use of information contained herein. Opinions of guests are their own, and this podcast does not endorse or accept responsibility for statements made by guests. This podcast does not make any representations or warranties about guest qualifications or credibility. This podcast may contain paid endorsements or advertisements for products or services. Individuals on this podcast may have a direct or indirect financial interest in products or services referred to herein. If you think you have a medical issue, consult a licensed physician.